All eyes were on Ozzy Osbourne when he passed away unexpectedly. Then Iommi has spoken up and his comments have fans scratching your heads. "Something was off with Ozzy that night," said Iommi, a mystery that he failed to fully reveal until the very end. Did he see anything? Did Ozzy already see this farewell written in his eyes? Their dying moments reality will make you gasp for air. Thank you. That caught everyone off guard. Terrible news woke the globe up on July 22, 2025. The renowned Black Sabbath frontman and Prince of Darkness, Ozzy Osbourne, died at the age of 76. A tremor went through the music industry and beyond when the news broke. The death of a man whose sultry voice, untamed energy and sinister charisma helped shape heavy metal for more than half a century was hard for fans, fellow artists, and worldwide media to accept. Ozzy performed his last gig under the bright lights of Birmingham's Villa Park Stadium only a few weeks ago. Despite his struggles with Parkinson's illness and multiple spinal operations, he gave a moving performance while seated on a handmade leather throne. Nobody in the audience or on stage knew this would be his last farewell. Few expected Ozzy's death to be as gradual as it was. His health reportedly improved following his last performance, and he was even rumored to be making plans to record one more song before calling it quits. Nevertheless, Ozzy supposedly passed away quietly in his sleep at his Buckinghamshire home, only one day following a private supper he attended with his bandmates. Alongside him stood his wife Sharon Osbourne and their children. Even now, Ozzy's absence seems surreal. He was energized, dominating the stage at Villa Park just days before he passed away. Just one more gig. In Aston, Birmingham, something remarkable happened on July 5, 2025. As the original Black Sabbath lineup regrouped for their last show together, Back to the Beginning was more than just a concert, it was an extraordinary occasion. It was a fitting farewell to the hometown that had inspired one of the most groundbreaking bands of all time. Even though he is fighting advanced Parkinson's illness, Ozzy Osbourne's entrance was so stunning that it left spectators gasping for air. He presided over a minimalist set that mirrored the ominous atmosphere of Black Sabbath, while sitting on a specially made winged leather throne. In spite of his seeming weakness, Ozzy's determination remained unwavering. His vocals resounded with true emotion, appreciation and nostalgia as he gave it his all in that moment. In Birmingham, around 45,000 spectators crammed into the outdoor stadium, on top of the 5.8 million that tuned in via the worldwide broadcast. It surpassed all other live music events that year in terms of viewership. In order to attend this farewell, some admirers had flown in from other continents. With Ozzy's health deteriorating over the past few years, many fans realized they might never witness the band play live again. The famous array of supporting acts only added to the night's significance. Pantera, Metallica, Slayer, Guns N' Roses, and Tool. In addition to performing, each artist paid tribute to the metal legends who came before them. In the intermissions between concerts, a number of artists discussed the impact that Ozzy and Black Sabbath had on their own careers. The energy in the stadium was palpable, as it was both a party and a goodbye. The significance and scale of the concert were not lost on the organizers behind the scenes. Word on the street is that Ozzy made it plain how much this show meant to him. Doctors were worried, but he was determined to deliver one final song for his fans and longtime bandmates. His close associates claim that he has expressed a preference for performing live in Birmingham rather than remaining in bed and watching. Additionally, the event had a positive impact. Sales of tickets, goods and donations from around the world through streaming contributed to a total of almost 140 million euros. In recognition of the band's working-class origins and dedication to their community, the proceeds were given to cure Parkinson's and Birmingham Children's Hospital, two causes dear to Ozzy's heart. Silence fell across the stadium as the last notes of Paranoid resounded. The lights went down and everyone rose to their feet. Ozzy, his hands shaking and his eyes watering, lifted them up. Bill Ward, Tony Iommi, and Geezer Butler were all equally moved as they stood by him. Raw music, unbridled camaraderie, and an appreciative audience made up for the lack of pyrotechnics and other show-stopping theatrics. That was long ago. Back to the Beginning went beyond being just a title that night. It was the final shout of the original kings of heavy metal, a moment of remembrance, a tribute, and a goodbye. Expressions of condolence from all corners of the globe arrived in his wake. In their condolences and recollections, Metallica, Elton John, Slash, and even Coldplay hailed Ozzy as one of the greatest performers of all time. As a way to honor the life of the working-class lad who became a worldwide legend, Black Sabbath fans lighted candles outside his former studio and gathered outside his childhood home in Aston, Birmingham. As messages of condolence came in from all around the globe, Tony Iommi became the center of attention. Many were waiting for a response from brother-in-arms. Tony Iommi finally speaks out regarding Ozzy Osbourne. Longtime buddy and Black Sabbath bandmate Tony Iommi finally spoke out on July 23, 2025, a day after the world learnt of Ozzy Osbourne's passing at the age of 76. Iommi told ITV News that the loss was unbelievable, and that he didn't realize how bad it was until the next morning. It was Ozzy's strong wish to play one last show in their hometown of Birmingham in the weeks preceding up to his passing. He wished he could stand before the audience for a final performance, something humble and sincere rather than a grand spectacle. Iommi claims that Ozzy wished for it to be a fitting farewell, a way to express gratitude to the fans who had supported him for almost half a century. Going out and doing what made him happy was his goal. And the beginning, Tony said, his voice quivering with emotion. Even though Ozzy couldn't perform at that final event due to health issues, the concept stuck with those who were close to him. In the same tribute, Tony remembered Ozzy's last days with the band and revealed how he had discreetly bid farewell to the fans as well as the band. "I'm at a loss for words because this news is so devastating. No one else will ever compare to him. Hard." Condolences, nostalgic images, and heartfelt words deluged social media. On repeat, radio stations played songs by Sabbath. Not only that, but famous people and fellow musicians like James Hetfield of Metallica and pop legend Elton John also added their voices to the mourning. Ozzy was obviously more than simply a heavy metal legend. He had an impact across several generations and musical styles. Because their connection was never mundane or fleeting, Iommi's remarks were burdened with profound sadness. The bond between brothers and the power of music would last a lifetime. Alright then, let's start at the beginning. Here is the riveting account of how Ozzy and Tony initially crossed paths. Prior to the celebrity, Tony Iommi and Ozzy Osbourne were just two kids surviving on the streets of Birmingham, England, before they became heavy metal legends. They didn't start out in a studio or on stage. It all started in the early 1960s, when they were both students at Birchfield Road School. Industry dominated Birmingham's character throughout the era. Metal and industrial odors pervaded the air as smoke billowed from the chimneys of the factories. Also, most lads were told that they wouldn't be performing beneath the lights of the stage, but rather on the assembly line. Although life was difficult, it was straightforward and honest. That meant that Tony and Ozzy and other youngsters like them grew up in a household where money was tight and frills were sparse. John Michael Osbourne, better known as Ozzy, was born into a large family in the Birmingham neighborhood of Aston. He was the fourth of 6 children. He was known to be the goofball in class, well known for causing a stir and amusing others. Even though he had a hard time with reading and writing in school, his charisma more than compensated. Ozzy frequently mentions how the life-altering experience of hearing the Beatles' "She Loves You" when he was a youngster. Although he was unaware of it at the time, it provided him with a feeling of direction. Compared to that, Tony Iommi was solemn and reserved. Growing up in Aston too, he was laser-focused and was reserved much of the time. He had no clue that music would influence his life's trajectory when he was a child, but he was always interested in it. Tony seemed more reserved than Ozzy, the type of student who made his presence known with quips and antics, preferring to watch rather than speak. Something clicked between them, even though they were different. They were cognizant of one another in school, but they did not immediately become close friends. Eventually, a friendship was formed by the shared atmosphere, harsh instructors, stringent regulations, and the gloomy prospect of a life in the factory. Both had experienced the mundane side of life and secretly yearned for something greater. Even after school ended, they remained close neighbors and frequently crossed paths. A genuine bond developed from what had begun as a passing acquaintanceship. Tony would think back on his school days years later, reflecting on how noticeable Ozzy's enthusiasm was even in those early days. Although rock stars were uncommon in Aston, two young men there unwittingly held the key to a new era. They were merely buddies in schoolyards, under smoke-stained skies, with ambitions too great for Birmingham before they became famous or became famous for their music. Now I'll tell you the story of how these two naive pals from the smoke-filled slums of Birmingham, England, became rock legends despite their modest origins. The revelation of the Black Sabbath. A musical movement known as Black Sabbath started in Birmingham in the early 1970s. Tony Iommi's deep riff-driven guitar work and Ozzy Osbourne's haunting and emotive vocals gave the band their distinctive sound, which brought a harder, darker side of rock music to the world. Fans jumped on board immediately, while detractors had trouble putting their finger on it. They weren't seeing the formation of a new band, they were seeing the birth of heavy metal as a whole. The spooky sound of church bells and thunder launched their 1970 self-titled debut album, Black Sabbath, which quickly distinguished them from their peers. They were able to convey the dread and uncertainty of their familiar working-class life through the album's raw, gloomy vibe. Lyrically, it struck a chord with a generation going through social and political upheaval because of its discussion of war, paranoia, and the occult. Their breakout album, Paranoid, was out only a short while after that. Paranoid, Iron Man, War Pigs, and the album's title track propelled them to stardom. Achieved stardom on a global scale. Its meteoric rise to the top of the US and UK charts spoke to the universality of their sound. Because of their honesty, energy, and power, the band gained a large fan base. Never before had Ozzy's piercing emotional delivery and Iommi's distorted heavy guitar tone been combined. Those debut albums' success was no accident. Master of Reality, Volume 4, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, Sabotage, and a slew of other seminal albums were released by Black Sabbath during the decade. Boundaries were further pushed with each record. Addiction, mental health, and the shadow side of celebrity were some of the topics addressed in the lyrics, while Iommi's guitar technique grew increasingly innovative, frequently including numerous tracks. Iommi and Osbourne's chemistry was undeniable, even in the face of individual struggles and mounting group conflicts. Iommi once said in an interview that the sum of our parts was more than the sum of our parts. They had an unspoken understanding as artists, and the remark reflects both that and the gravity of their success. Black Sabbath played before sold-out crowds in arenas all around the world throughout the 1970s. Their devoted fan base extended across several generations. As word of Sabbath spread, it influenced other metal bands, such as Metallica, Iron Maiden, and Slayer, who in turn credited them with creating the genre. Black Sabbath had sold more than 75 million albums globally by the decade's end. Rock music had been reimagined by these Birmingham natives, who are now revered all over the world. Also, they went through some rough patches that made them question their friendship. We will witness their resilience in the face of adversity as they clung to the friendship that began before their celebrity. Black Sabbath's path was never a bed of roses. Now comes the reunion. Particularly for Ozzy Osbourne, it was 1979 when his inner turmoil and psychological problems finally broke him. The band struggled to function due to Ozzy's growing use on alcohol and hazardous substances, years of relentless touring and industry pressure. The surviving members, spearheaded by Tony Iommi, finally decided to split ways with their long-standing vocalist after numerous failed attempts to keep the band together. A new era began with the split. A sad period in his life. Ozzy's dismissal from Black Sabbath marked the start of his solo career, which he later acknowledged. It was Iommi's personal mission to ensure that the Sabbath name would endure. In the 2 decades that followed, he tried out various band configurations and lead singers. Ronnie James Dio, Ian Gillan, and Tony Martin were all great additions to the band as singers, but they couldn't replace the initial synergy. Even while the music was still powerful, many wanted the old lineup back, and critics were no different. The friendship between Ozzy and Iommi persisted behind the scenes. Both men look back on their youth with fondness and reverence as they grew older, and time began to mend old scars. No amount of hardship could ever break the bonds they had forged in the playground, where they had first discovered each other's musical talents. At long last, in 2013, the reunion took place. With the release of their 13th studio album, the original lineup of Iommi, Osbourne and Geezer Butler reunited. Commercially, the album was a smashing success, reaching #1 in more than one country and garnering accolades for bringing back the band's signature raw energy. It was a new beginning, not merely a return. After the record was out, the band went on a huge global tour. Despite internal strife that prevented drummer Bill Ward from participating on the tour, the reunion was nonetheless hailed as a success. When Iommi and Ozzy were reunited on stage, fans all around the globe were ecstatic. Even though Ozzy's passing ushered in a new musical era, Tony Iommi is certain that his memory will endure in perpetuity. We must discover Iommi's opinion on the enduring influence of Ozzy on the rock and metal community, in the perspective of Iommi. In addition to the conclusion of a musical chapter, Tony Iommi mourned the death of Ozzy Osbourne, a brother, a friend, and someone who had been a constant in his life for more than half a century. During the difficult days after Ozzy's passing in July 2025, Iommi's remarks encapsulated the sorrow felt by millions globally. "There will never be another Ozzy," he declared plainly. The weight of years spent performing, rehearsing and touring together was in that declaration. A goodbye was being said, not merely to an associate, but to a person whose soul influenced the development of rock music. That was Iommi's belief that Ozzy was aware that would be his last bow. "He gave everything he had," Iommi whispered, before stealthily disappearing. It was a powerful display of Ozzy's devotion to music and his desire to finish his trip in the same place he had started, with his bandmates and fans. Iommi excluded accolades and record sales while discussing Ozzy's impact. He instead spoke about shared laughter and overcoming adversity. "Oh my, our history goes all the way back." Silently and contemplatively, he stated that there was only ever going to be one Ozzy. Both Ozzy's voice and the tumultuous enchantment he brought to each room he visited were irreplaceable to Iommi. The impact of Ozzy Osbourne on the music industry is immense. He revolutionized the way heavy metal could feel and sound as its untamed frontman. The essence of Black Sabbath was his voice, raw, emotive and immediately identifiable. From new Paranoid listeners in their teens to international music legends like Metallica and Elton John, who have paid tribute to Ozzy's impact, his shadow casts a long shadow over the rock music industry. That legacy is very personal to Iommi. The indestructible link they created in Birmingham's factories and streets is just as important as the music and tours that have brought it to life. Iommi is certain that Ozzy's legacy will endure long after his death. Every single fan who cranks up the volume will hear it rumbling through their speakers. How do you feel about the strong bond that Tony Iommi and Ozzy Osbourne share? Leave your opinions in the space provided.